Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening whenever you're watching or listening to this. And welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you today, dear?
I am great. How are you?
I am good.
Good.
I am looking forward to the holidays. I know we talked about this yesterday. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to dinner tonight. It is my very best friend of all time's birthday today. So I'm taking her to dinner. That would be Emma. I know I throw 100 names at you guys every day. I know. That would be Emma. Yesterday was her boyfriend Curtis's birthday. And then today is her birthday. So on paper, they should not work as a couple because two Sagittariuses a day away from each other should never work, but they do, and they're beautiful, and I love her, and we are going to dinner tonight, so I'm very excited about that.
Awesome.
Then we have a party this weekend, and I'm just gearing up for all the things, man. Just ready for
good stuff.
The never-ending chaos that is the month of December. But how are you? You're getting ready to go on vacation.
Yeah, finally, first one in about 5 years. I think like
crazy.
First actual vacation that I've taken in like 5-6 years. I don't know. I guess took vacations at college 6 years ago.
You are not allowed. I heaven help you if you send me anything work related while you're on this vacation. I will come for you.
So I have flights. So I'm probably going to be working on the flight. A few pending things that I really need to get done on the flight there tomorrow. Leaves at 6 a.m. I don't know. It was the only flight that was. Yeah, I know that can get to Cancun. That wasn't like 17 hours.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Luckily, everything is on Delta, so it's probably one of the better flights, I would imagine, to Cancun. I don't know.
It's not less Spirit. Likely to be canceled. Yeah, it's not American.
It's not American.
Hopefully, you and your things will all get there at the same time, safe and sound.
Yes,
right. There's kind of like that inherent trust with Delta.
Yeah. Thank you, Delta. But no, everything is good. I'm excited. We have an amazing guest today, a guest that we had someone from his company on to talk about a different topic that are very related for Multiply Me.
Yes.
Is it Yanni or Yoni?
We're going to have to ask Yanni. Him. I always call him Yanni, but we're going to have to ask Lipi. And I actually had the benefit of meeting Lipi when we were in Miami while you were being delayed by American Airlines.
Right.
So great guy. That's actually where we decided that he was going to be on the podcast. We hung out at the sellers dinner. Just awesome guy calling in from Tel Aviv. So let's go on ahead and bring him on. Lipi, good evening to you.
Good evening, guys. Happy birthday, Emma. Enjoy Cancun, Francois.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping on right before your flight. But it was a pleasure to meet you. And Francois, I didn't get to meet you, but excited for this podcast.
Yes, we definitely are too.
It looks like the who's who of everyone was at this dinner that I just so happen to miss. That absolutely sucks. Hopefully they should be doing a few other sellers dinners. And if you haven't heard of the sellers dinners, I think they were hosted by eCom Cooperative. Indeed. And a few other companies. So if you look up eCom Cooperative, you'll probably find a few more. I heard they were doing one in California. I think that's what David told us.
That wasn't supposed to be released yet.
Sorry, David.
They are doing another one after the new year, and they were undecided on the location last time we talked to him, but it was maybe gonna be on the East Coast. But wait, are we on the West Coast?
West Coast.
Oh my God, you guys, on the West Coast. So back to what we were pondering before. Is it Yanni or is it Yoni? Because we know with Yoni Mazur it is Yoni, but is it Yanni Kosminski or Yoni Kosminski?
It's Yanni Kosminski, but it really depends on where you're from. Because he's Australian, so it's Yanni. But if you're in the US, I think Yoni is acceptable. He actually lived in the US for I think 4 years, so Yoni is definitely acceptable.
I do remember that.
I've always called him Yanni. That's how we distinguish who we're talking about. It's Yanni and then Yoni is.
That's what we tried to at least. Well, you have quite an Australian accent, I think. I don't know. If I'm appropriating by any means, let me know. But I think it's an Australian accent.
Shut it down.
How did you find yourself in Tel Aviv?
Cancel Francois. So I grew up in Australia. My parents are both born in Australia. And when I was 19, I moved to Israel. I'm Jewish. I spent a lot of time in Israel growing up, and I have family here. I had a lot of friends here, and I just wanted to move here. And I probably wasn't ready to go to university, which is what a lot of people do straight after high school. So moved here, and I was actually in the military here for 4 years, which is, it's compulsory to sort of serve here. But I ended up signing on for a lot longer and was an officer in the military here. And then I've decided to stay, and I've sort of started to build my career in Tel Aviv, which is an awesome city, by the way, and you guys have to come and visit.
Oh, I would love to. And happy belated Hanukkah to you. I know it ended like 2 days ago.
Yeah. Last night was the last night. Thank you.
Yeah. So happy Hanukkah. I'd love to go out there and visit Tel Aviv. I had my girlfriend had the opportunity to go. She's Jewish as well, for I forget what they call it. Oh, I'm awful. The trip that most
birthright.
Yes, the birthright trip.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And then a few years later, she was like, I probably should have done that. I was like, yes, that's why we all told you to go. Yeah. She's like, I'll get there eventually. Jesus Christ.
It would be awesome if there was an Amazon conference in Israel. There's a huge Amazon presence here.
Huge presence.
And then, a lot of Jewish Americans, and then, everyone's welcome. So I think that, stay tuned, but I think that there might be something here in 2022. Don't hold me to it.
Okay.
We'll talk about it after.
We'll chat about it. Well, but Lipi, that makes total sense, though, that you served in the military and then now you're kind of in this position of organizational structure and, creating processes and I don't know, that it all makes sense now. There's such a direct correlation between the two. So how did you find Escala? Well, how did you and Yanni get connected? Because you guys co-founded Escala, right?
Yeah, right. So after the army, I was sort of planning on going to university or college. And in order to do that, I couldn't use my high school marks from Australia. I had to sit a test here. And that test sort of takes up part of your time. And I was just thinking of, getting a part-time job as a bartender or a barista and just taking it easy, because the army is very intense. And then on my first night here, I traveled for about 2 months after the army. And on my first night, I was jet lagged and I wanted to sort of keep myself up. So I went to football training, which is Australian football. There's like a group of about 20 guys who played Australian football at the park here. And I was like, you know what, I'll go to keep me awake so that I get over this jet lag. And on my first night, after promising myself that I was going to take it easy, I meet this guy, Yanni, charismatic, sort of energetic, excited about life. And he's like, I just got moved up in this e-commerce business. They're selling products on Amazon. It's awesome. And in the back of my head, I'm like, don't say it. Can I have a job? So I started working with Yanni. I pretty much started as an intern. He was, part of the senior leadership. It was a small team. It was about 7 people, and they were doing really well on Amazon, which was still new. It was like back in 2017. And not new, but it was still the gold rush. And I came in, and the CEO was, and this was a multi-million-dollar company. The CEO was spending half of his day on customer service, and I was like, that doesn't seem like the best use of your time. Let me do it. So I took on customer service, and within about 3 weeks, I was like, this is really repetitive, templatized, and back then you could transform a negative review into a positive review pretty well. So it was effective. It was important, the work. But I was like, we could probably build a team to do this so that I could free myself up to do other things. So he'd spent about 4 years spending half of his days doing customer support. And within like 3 weeks, I was like, just give me 2 weeks out of the office. I'll build a training course of what I do. And then we can onboard a team. And we onboarded a team from the Philippines. And that's sort of how we started to grow. So we onboarded, I think, 4 people from the Philippines to all work part-time. Pretty quickly, they ramped up into full-time. And then they sort of got wind of what I was doing. And they're like, okay, he's just outsourced the entire customer support function. He now spends like 1 hour a week on it instead of half a day every single day. Maybe we can do this with other areas of the business. So then we did that with like supply chain, marketing, and pretty quickly we had a team of, I think we were 7 in Israel and about 35 in the Philippines. And then that business eventually exited to Thrasio. It was one of Thrasio's first acquisitions. So when we finished that, we were sort of thinking, what's next? And I think what we were doing that was unique that most other people in the Amazon community don't do is really like leveraging top level Filipino talent and not low level talent, and really empowering them to like help grow your business rather than just doing a very specific repetitive task. And really quickly we discovered unbelievable talent, and our entire operation was, run from the Philippines. Everyone in Israel was either working on future product development or really like high level managerial stuff. Like I was pretty much spending my time as a manager. So we thought, this is something, instead of going back into Amazon as our next venture, Yanni and I thought there's a really cool opportunity to help other sellers and other people in the Amazon community like effectively outsource, which is what Multiply Me is all about. It's not just about finding cheap talent, even though talent is a lot cheaper than finding local talent. It's about finding top level talent and effectively onboarding them. So that's sort of where Multiply Me started, and that started first. And then pretty quickly we recognized, there's one component which is finding the right people and sort of treating them well and empowering them to do their job. And then the next thing is like, you really need to have a system in order to effectively delegate, whether that be someone sitting in the office or someone sitting on the other side of the world. In order to like effectively delegate, you really need things standardized, and you need like a proper template. And you need to give people structure so that within that structure, they can be creative, because if there's no structure, the creativity is sort of just like, it's way too disorganized. So that's where Escala came in, and we started to offer a service where we would help you basically turn your side hustle that managed to make you millions of dollars into a real business, where with real process and real systems. And sort of our tagline, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot more, is like helping you align your people, process, and technology to set you up for scale or sale. That's sort of like what we do in a nutshell. And Escala came about 6 months after, and now they're two thriving, living businesses that work beautifully with one another, but you can work with them individually as well.
That's so entrepreneurial. I love that. That's you found an opportunity.
Too.
Yeah.
You guys were like, let's do it.
Found
let's
an
go.
opportunity. You saw that there was something that could be done to improve the business, and you took it. I mean, that's true entrepreneurship, some might call it, but it is entrepreneurship at the end of the day. What made you, or I guess at that time, what made you think to go to the Philippines? Did you already know about virtual assistants?
Yeah, so that decision didn't come from me. When we were talking about outsourcing, I think Yanni had previously worked with the Philippines, and a couple of other guys had also. Now I can tell you that the reason that we work with the Philippines, and I'm sure there's a lot of amazing other hubs, and it's not a competition, but the reason that we love working with the Philippines is unbelievable English. So English is sort of the educational language. A lot of them have their own personal dialect, but they study English at school, so they've all got really great English. Very Americanized. So, I said it wasn't a comparison, but when you work with India, they've got sort of their own culture, whereas the Filipino culture is very, very similar to America. They watch the same movies as Americans, and they really come from like very similar mindsets. So it's easier to make that connection. And then just in general, like they're very career driven. So the misconception is if you pay them enough, if you pay your VA enough money, then they'll stay with you. And it's like, no, that's not true at all. They're very career driven. The people that we work with are some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. And if they don't feel challenged, if they don't feel like they're developing to the next stage in their career, they're going to leave. So, and I think that that's something that Americans and sort of Western civilization can really identify with, and they can understand that a bit better. And they know how to incentivize that and sort of motivate that. And then just, generally lovely people. We started the business early last year, so we actually haven't been able to go over to the Philippines, which is like a tragedy. But as soon as they open those borders, I'm right there, because some of my best friends live there now. And I just love sort of working with our team in the Philippines every day.
Yeah, we've got two. We're gonna get a third VA from the Philippines, and we love them. Paul and Jera are just absolutely incredible. And you're totally right, because the work that we've given Paul, he's incredible, but it's a little more standardized. With Jera, she can be a little bit more creative, and she's messaging me all the time. She's like, "Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, I came up with this new plan. Hey," and I'm like, "Yes, girlfriend, go. Yes, please, all the things." Like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think Yeah, sorry.
Oh, go, please. Yeah. We're here for you.
I think what's important that a lot of people miss is like, even though there are a lot of similarities between Filipino culture and, let's say, US culture, there are a lot of differences that are important to understand and bridge that cultural gap. So one, really common one is, I think in the US and for sure in Israel, a common onboarding strategy is like throw them into the deep end and see how they go, which, it definitely works in Israel. You want to give someone an opportunity to prove themselves and let them prove themselves. I would do that if I was to hire someone in Israel. If I was to hire someone in the Philippines, I would look to cultivate as many quick wins as possible very early on, to give them that confidence. And then like, once they've got that confidence and they feel comfortable in the team, they feel stable. One of the main things that they're looking for is stability and security. So, and I'm generalizing here a population of 100 million. So I apologize in advance for that. But what it tends to be is like, if you can create those quick wins and allow them to build confidence, that pretty quickly they'll start to feel a lot more comfortable to push back on specific things, to be creative, like apparently your team members are.
Sure.
And so that's sort of one just key tip that I would give to anyone. And in Escala, for example, we onboard people really quickly because we have sort of an onboarding plan that they go and they read and they sort of do self-learning, and then there's an assessment and they get that quick win, and then there's another sort of smaller task and then they get that quick win, and that all happens before we throw them onto their first project. So that's a recommendation I would give to anyone out there working with someone from the Philippines.
That's great. And at what point in time, so kind of to get back to, the organizational structure of growing these e-com businesses, obviously you guys are a big proponent of, hiring those really great VAs out of the Philippines. I mean, clearly, but at what point in time does it make sense to make an in-house hire as opposed to a VA? I mean, you can run, Carlos Alvarez is a perfect example of this. You can run a very successful business with a huge network of VAs. The man's got more VAs for one business.
Right?
Hundreds. I think 282 is the figure, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, you can be very successful with that large network, but he does have a lot of in-house managerial staff to help kind of manage that tree of folks, right? At what point in time does it make more sense for an e-commerce business owner who is making that switch from side hustle to business to make an in-house hire as opposed to a VA hire?
Yeah. Well, I think when I talk about in-house, there's inherent value to face-to-face. Yoni and I sit next to each other, and we've got Tom as well, who's our sort of chief growth officer. He sits in Israel, and we sit face-to-face, and there's so much value from being able to just turn around, swivel on your chair and tap someone on the shoulder and say, what do you think about this? But when we talk about sort of VAs versus in-house, I think the whole position of Multiply Me is that with the new world, and obviously COVID accelerated this like crazy, it shouldn't matter necessarily whether you're working remotely and both of you are sitting in, one of you sitting in New York and the other's in New Jersey, or one of you sitting in New York and the other sitting in the Philippines. If you can find the right talent, which Multiply Me, sort of the reason we exist is to help you do that, then the idea is that you should be able, it shouldn't really matter whether someone is in the Philippines, they're all sort of just part of your team. And you don't have this notion of like, I've got my in-house team and my offshore team if everyone's working remotely in general. That obviously, the exception to that is if there's FaceTime. And I think FaceTime is something that we're dying to get with our team in the Philippines, even though they're an offshore team. We're dying to get that FaceTime so that, because there's just so much value in being able to sort of all sit in one room and brainstorm and sort of throw ideas against the wall and play devil's advocate and things like that. And it's just a bit harder to do that on Zoom. But yeah, our position as Multiply Me is the future is in what we'd call augmented teams, and not necessarily I've got my US team and my offshore team. It's sort of like, our COO sits in the Philippines, and she's one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my life. And not just us COO, we've got our chief product officer, and we've, our Escala operations manager sits there, and really like our entire business is run from the Philippines. And I think that, we've proven it out to ourselves that that you can pretty much grow globally, and you don't need to view your team in the Philippines as an offshore team if you sort of give them the stage to really prove themselves out and help you grow your business. So I think, I'm not sure if that answered the question entirely, but or at all.
Well, I guess those folks kind of sit. I don't know. I do agree that, like, especially in COVID times, it's kind of been highlighted that, you can do your job from anywhere in the world with respect to certain positions. Like, if you're a brain surgeon, you can't do that remotely. Like, obviously, It's very hands-on. But especially for an e-commerce business, it does make sense that it can be kind of, globally done. But I guess when I say like in-house, I guess I kind of mean more like, and maybe this is just like a distinction that I'm making, because in our business, it is a little bit more segmented out of, like, I don't know how to phrase this, like, key players are like internal. And then for more task oriented positions, those are what we hire VAs for. So I guess that was kind of the question I was asking, was like, when does it, I don't know how to ask the question.
I totally understand the question, because what we're doing, we know that we're trying to disrupt a very sort of like a paradigm that exists. There's no doubt about that. And sort of this notion of, like, the decision makers are in-house, and sort of the doers can be anywhere in the world. And 100% we're trying to disrupt that. I think that we do it internally. So, Yoni and I, we are barely involved in the operation. I mean, Yoni's not involved at all in the operation. Yoni spends all his time thinking, like, 6 months, 12 months into the future. He's sort of looking to develop new partnerships and find sort of strategic pathways for us. If he had it his way, he would be starting a new business every 3 months. But I think that all of our decision makers are in the Philippines. We've now, inside of Escala, we've helped a lot of Amazon businesses on board, operations managers or supply chain managers who really make key decisions for our business. And it's a paradigm shift that we're trying to help as many people as possible make, because it's not only in the Philippines. I mean, all over the world, there's unbelievable talent. And with so much of the workforce going remote and not getting that FaceTime value anyway, if you have the right mindset and you can find the right people, it shouldn't matter whether that person sits, in the Philippines or in India or in Pakistan or in, South America is a big one now. South Africa is a big one, because it's a more scalable way to grow your business if you can extract from that talent the same that you could extract from someone who's going to sit remotely anyway in the US. So that's sort of our mission, is to break down that paradigm, and we believe in the future of global work. It's not going to be for everyone. We're not trying to be everything for everyone. We're trying to cater to a specific audience that sort of believes, like, maybe that would be possible, and if it did happen to succeed, I would be, I'd free up so much cash that I could spend on all these other things, or that I could reinvest into the business. And we're trying to find those types of people and empower them to actually go and make that dream a reality.
And so, I mean, I completely get it. With us using VAs, I mean, we also have a larger team actually in China. So we have two offices in China, one in Vietnam, one here in the US. And we all kind of, work together, and it did take a long time to create those systems and processes. I mean, ultimately, when we were building something new, especially, it took a longer time because it's different. What does a business owner need to do, I guess, to start considering VAs? Because, you did mention that it takes the right people. If you find very great talent out there, they can help you grow your business. But I think from the business owner perspective, or from a small team perspective, let's say 7 people, they need to prepare something to get that top talent in, right? For that onboarding process that you're talking about. Can you walk us through, I guess, those few first weeks? What do you need to prepare for them? How much FaceTime should you be giving them? Not in person, but let's say via Zoom. What do you need to tell them about the business?
It's a great question.
There's a lot.
the easiest answer that I would say is, like, if you want to give your VA the stage to really succeed, then you should consider their onboarding the same that you would consider someone local. And for something like that, and that's a whole difficult task in and of itself. But a great reference for that is a book like The First 90 Days, which I love that book, and it talks all about how to accelerate learning during the first 90 days to make someone a valuable member of the team as quickly as possible. But No, let's throw away that answer because it's
read a book. It's part of the answer.
Meaning, like, let's throw away that answer and sort of speak specifically about offshore teams. Let's say you'd never worked with someone from an offshore team before and you wanted to start doing it. The first sort of tip that I would say is, and a common sort of mistake that I see a lot of people make is, there's going to be cost savings, but the only thing you're going to focus on is how cheap can you get this to be. It's not going to succeed. So like, it might succeed. You're not going to see like a sort of a high performing team member come in if the main thing you're looking for is how do I get this cost as low as possible. So sort of come to terms with the fact that like you're probably going to be saving at least a third, probably more, on hiring this person virtually rather than the US, and move on from that pillar. Like your next pillar should be, how do I find someone who's high quality, or how do I find someone who's, going to commit to me, and I'm going to see like that retention rate. And hopefully you should be willing to like pay slightly more in order to find someone who's not the cheapest out there, but is going to be like a really valuable team member to you. So that's in terms of like finding the right person. But in terms of like onboarding them, I think creating like a really clear structure as to this is exactly what I'm expecting. And, creating things like KPIs. I think a lot of people, when it comes to KPIs, they're very open to building KPIs for their internal team. When it comes to their offshore team, it's like, no, they sort of just need to do these tasks, and I'll be happy. And I know that for everyone on our team, if we're not showing them what's their career development, like what will impress us and what will they be rewarded for, then they're not going to work as well. So if, let's say it's a product listing specialist, and I come and say, for the first week, I want you to go through all of our listings, just do like a really basic audit. I want you to make sure that everything, Amazon does crazy things to your listings. So I want you to make sure that we've got the correct amount of images on all of our listings, and the text looks, fine. And if you can find any spelling errors, great. But after that, after the first week, I want you to go and assess the conversion rates of our top 5 performing ASINs. And I want you to find a way to improve those conversion rates by 5%. That's your KPI. In terms of how you're going to do that, I've got all these different resources that I can give you in terms of how to improve the conversion rate, but I really want you to sort of use your expertise to try and do that. Now, depending on the level of the person you brought in, that might be too much of a leap of faith. And you might want to sort of consider scaling that back a bit so that you can make it a lot more feasible and create that quick win. But the main, I guess the main piece of advice is like, just delegate the responsibility, not the task. So you are responsible for increasing conversion rates, not you are responsible for going and changing this image to this image, because then you're not really delegating and you're never going to really free yourself up, which is probably the reason why you hired that offshore talent in the first place. So yeah, that's a tagline that we use a lot in our recommendations, is delegate the why, not the how, or delegate the responsibility, not the task, because that's true delegation.
Well, how do you explain, let's say, the why and the how? Because, for example, you were saying the audits. If someone was hiring me as a VA, I have no clue. Like, how many images do you need to have in an Amazon listing? I don't know. I could look for misspellings. That's clear. But I guess what level of detail do you need to provide them to begin with? Do you have to say, hey, it has to have 7 images and all of them have to be within these sort of compliances? Like, do you have to prepare an entire system of you doing it yourself and then delegating that how to them? Aside from the why. The why is a different story, of course.
So to start with, I mean, I would hope that if I was going to hire a product listing specialist, I would hire someone with experience in product listings. So, someone with at least a year of experience working with an Amazon seller, working on their product listings, so that a lot of that basic knowledge would be already understood. So that's the starting point. And I think that talent exists. You need to know where to look for it. It's not always easy, but that talent does exist. And then the next thing is like, yeah, I would want to have a knowledge bank ready, like a wiki, an internal wiki or something like that. Or even if it's external resources that I've vetted and I say, hey, here's this YouTube influencer that I really, really like, and pretty much everything he says, I would agree with. Or like, I've actually watched this video and I would love for you to watch it too, because everything in here can be considered as like gospel. and basically going and saying, oh, these are the things I want you to do. It really depends on like the level of the person. When I think of delegating something like that, I'm thinking of a high level person who gets it, who is being brought onto my team not as like a VA. And by the way, we'll never give anyone the title of VA, and we can talk about that in a second. But I'm bringing someone on who gets it, who's a professional, and I'm going to sort of consider working with them the same way that I would consider working with a listing specialist that I brought in Israel, who's previously, owned an Amazon store. So obviously the onboarding plan needs to be relevant to their level of expertise, but I would want to stretch them to really use all of their expertise and not just follow a basic template that I've put together that they probably know better than that template that I've sort of created.
Okay. And so we're talking more so specialists that have experience. Is that something that you would put together, let's say like a job listing or posting for, and then that's how you determine your why? Or I guess where does the why come from? Is it just like an objective you want to get to? What if you want to be creative and you said, well, I want to just attract new customers with this type of demographic? How do you explain that why to them?
In that example, I guess, who would you give that task to? You couldn't give that task to someone who doesn't have a background in sort of marketing, in growth marketing or something like that. They wouldn't know sort of where to start when it comes to that type of demographic. And when we talk about delegation, the rule of delegation that we use is like, only delegate something if you think the person you're delegating it to can do it 80% as well as you can, because at that point it becomes worth it. If they're going to do it 60% as well as you can and it's an important task, it's like that might be too much of a sacrifice, and that time that you're going to save might not be as valuable as that extra 40% that they're missing out on. So we would only delegate something if we believe the person doing it could do it 80% as well as us. Now that would be a combination of two things: A, the talent and experience and expertise of that person, and B, like how well have I actually onboarded them. But I'm getting the sense that that we're talking about a different level of sort of of talent, because not to plug Multiply Me, but when you work with Multiply Me, you are very specific about the job, about like the job requirements that you're looking for, and then we're going to go and search for that exact person, and you're not going to onboard them unless they've passed your interviews. So we really are working with like a higher level of talent, and we don't really sort of just hire generalists who don't really have any experience and can just do a couple of like really simple things. We hire people who have a proven record, and the method that we use is from another book, The A Method for Hiring, which I really recommend everyone read, even if you're not a recruiter, because at some point you'll hopefully be a hiring manager, and make the hire no hire decision. So that's an amazing book that literally spells out exactly what we do inside of Multiply Me, exactly step by step what's a really professional recruitment process, and it's not that hard to run. It actually saves you time overall.
Okay.
And as these e-commerce businesses are growing, and I think I'm asking an it depends question because we love doing that. What should be kind of those first key hires for that higher level talent that the founder should be looking to make? I think I know the answer, but what would you recommend?
I'm interested in your answer, because it definitely does depend. I guess the typical fairy tale of an Amazon seller is that they started it when they still had a full-time job. Pretty quickly, they brought in more revenue than their entire annual salary, so they quit that job, and then started to work on this full-time. And typically, like, Amazon sellers see that growth, that really sort of fast growth, especially back in like 2017, 2018. And then it gets a bit overwhelming because all of a sudden you've got, like, instead of making $5,000 purchase orders, you're making $50,000 purchase orders. And if you're not selling out this inventory, like, you're not going to have any cash. And so pretty quickly it becomes like a whole thing that you really need to deal with. And at that point it becomes like much more of a business than a side hustle. So it sort of depends on what what's taking up the most of your time, the rule that I would use is that rule of delegation. So like, and there's lots of frameworks for things like this, but like the Eisenhower Matrix, for example. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of that, but you've basically got like, so pretend like 4 quadrants, and every task that you do in a day goes into one of the quadrants, and the quadrants are based on urgency. So urgent, non-urgent, and then important, not important, or let's say impactful, non-impactful, because everything's important. So, so let's say you've got a highly urgent, highly impactful task that you need to do. Well, you should probably go and do that yourself. But if you've got, let's say, a low impact but highly urgent task, those tend to be the ones that end up taking up a lot of your time, because it's urgent, someone needs to do it, it sort of just needs to happen, and but it's not that impactful, and you could probably delegate that really effectively and sort of see the same type of results. So typically with Amazon sellers, it's things like customer support. How impactful is customer support? You can just do it at a really good level without having such level of expertise. So that is urgent because you've got your SLAs, but it's not so impactful. So that tends to be one of the first things that people delegate. Another thing that people tend to delegate really quickly is like everything to do with keyword research, because there are templates for that. So it is impactful, but it doesn't really require like a huge level of expertise. So it does if you want to get like really, really good, but there are lots of templates out there, amazing software out there. So you could probably delegate that and still do that 80% as well as if you were going to do it yourself, especially if you build like a process. So that tends to be something that people outsource really quickly. And then also a lot of Amazon sellers sort of graduate from, I'm doing it all myself, to I pay agencies to do these things for me, because sometimes that's smarter than bringing it in-house. And then from there, they tend to graduate to like, okay, these agencies are really expensive. It's time to bring everything in-house. And I'm going to spend most of my day becoming a manager instead of becoming like a contributor. And that's something that Escala sees a lot, is like managers making that shift from, founders making that shift from like, I do everything in the business, to now pretty much all I do is manage. And like, if I come in and I make 5 good decisions a day, that's like a great day for me, because I've got a team around me who's really delivering on all the things that I used to do. So yeah, in answer to the question that you initially asked, it does depend, but using that sort of rule of delegation of like, what's the thing that takes up the most of my time that if I gave it to someone else, they could do it 80% as well as me, that would be sort of how I would make that decision.
And then is there a typical org structure that you tend to see e-commerce businesses build? And I'm not talking necessarily specific to Amazon, or I guess the question is, does Escala specifically work with Amazon, or is it e-commerce across the board?
It's e-commerce across the board, but more than 80% of it is Amazon.
Sure.
Okay. Well, how do you see, let's say, that initial founder? I think that the first leap that they need to take is thinking about what the next, 1 to 5 positions might be, right? Of course, the tasks that they might want to delegate, but let's say I really want to scale. What do I, hire, let's say, someone to be a COO? Do I need someone to help me maybe with marketing? I guess, where do you see this traditional path of e-commerce founders building out their org structure?
I think it depends a lot on what the strength is of the founder. And most founders, they want to be working on the things that they love doing. So it tends to be that, I would say more than 80% of the founders we work with, they love to work on product development. They're sort of product development gurus. They've launched multiple products, and that's where they want to be spending their time. So then when it comes to like, what should they delegate first? What is the arm of the org structure that they should build first? It's probably going to be things like supply chain, marketing, the things that, they don't really love, or they don't think that they're particularly good at, but they know that they want to be spending a lot of their time on product development. So those are the things that they can sort of outsource first. But if there's someone that doesn't really fancy themselves so much in product development, they're not really a creator, they're more of the analytical type, and they think that their competitive advantage is going to be on optimizing listings and improving conversion rates by, a couple of percent, and that's what's going to really move the needle in their business. Then they might want to, build that product development arm of the business first, and spend most of their time on like the analyzing side of how are my listings performing, how could I improve it by 1% every day. So again, the answer is it depends. So sorry about that, but again, I think founders need to at some point recognize, what do I love doing and what am I uniquely good at that I couldn't delegate, and delegate everything else and then focus on that one thing, plus on managing sort of the team.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking would be the answer of like, what do you delegate out? Because obviously, like what got you here is not going to get you there. Like what got you started on Amazon is not going to make you a 6, 7, 8 figure seller. And as a founder, if you're a shit bookkeeper, like I would be, my first hire is going to be a bookkeeper. It's like, I've been bootstrapping this thing, but that's not going to work anymore. I can't spend my time on this. And like you said, with the founder originally spending all the time on customer service, that's not the best use of his time. Like there's at a certain point in time, you're kind of just wasting resources. So again, we love asking it depends questions. I mean, inadvertently, but that's kind of true, right? I mean, and that's why services like Escala kind of exist. So it's like, okay, let's take a deep dive in your business and figure that out. That's why
and I think
so many it depends.
I think there's a lot of founders that I've seen who have consciously tried to become what they believe that they should be. So sort of like this manager who is in a bit of everything, and pretty much inevitably it fails. Like if you're not doing what you really love to do every day, the business isn't going to succeed. And so you need to find a way to sort of delegate everything that you don't love doing and that you don't think you're uniquely good at to other members of the team. And obviously that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But eventually that's going to be the best thing for the business growth. And I think a lot of, to talk about the aggregator world, a lot of businesses have left so much money on the table because the founders they just couldn't anymore, and they had to get rid of this business. And I think that that's such a shame, because there is an opportunity for founders to really scale and turn their businesses that they nurtured and babied, turn those businesses into something that they love doing every day, where they can take vacations and they're not under sort of constant debt. But it's really just a question of like becoming that, shifting the mindset to like, this is a real business. This is not a side hustle. And once you do that, you can start to make decisions like key hires, bringing on, if you hate operations, but you love product development and you just sold your business because you found that all you were doing every day was operations. Well, there's probably going to be ways to like standardize the operation, bring in someone who's really good at it, free yourself up so that you can focus all your time on product development. And I say that because we've helped people do that. And it's something that's totally feasible. And I think that if you can stay with your Amazon business for longer before you eventually exit, in most scenarios, it's going to be super beneficial for you, because this aggregator capital, it's not going anywhere. And if you can be like, if you can be triple your size in 3 years, you're probably going to get more than just triple your exit value that you would get today.
Mm-hmm. And we'll give Joe 2 shameless plugs. 2 days in a row. Joe Valley wrote a great book called The Exitpreneur's Playbook, and it speaks a lot to what you just said about like, kind of creating that business that you love working in, but when it comes time to exit, you're not leaving a ton of money on the table. So shameless plug for Joe there. We'll link the book. But go ahead, Francois. I'm sorry.
Great podcast with the Quiet Light podcast too. Well, when it comes to systems and processes, right? Because that's a big part of Escala. It's pretty much all of Escala. What if, let's say, a founder that has started hiring and but it's chaotic, right? Especially as you're scaling, or any startup that's out there, which is essentially any founder that got on Amazon and just launched a great business, ended up doing really well, needs to scale that up. What if they're not good at systems and processes? What if everything is functioning? They're making money. Let's say they crack over $1 million a year, and then they're getting to 2 million and 3 million, but they still don't have this organized systems and processes in place. How do they start to shift, I guess, this chaos into a very organized S&P?
Well, it's a great question. We've spent a lot of time sort of trying to educate founders on how you can actually do this yourself. And I'm 100% of the belief that even if you're not a systems and process person, you can do this yourself and you can leverage your team to actually help you. I think the the key mistake that people make, let's start with that before we say what you should do. What you shouldn't do is think about the most complex, granular processes that you can possibly think of, and then build like really long PDF files of how to do this. Because if there's nothing that ties it all together, if there's no like overarching process map that you can sort of understand where each process falls into place, then yeah, you might have a few killer like SOPs, but pretty quickly they're going to be outdated. There's not going to be any system for actually maintaining them. And a lot of the time, most founders have created so many SOPs that they don't even know where to find them anymore, because they're like really granular and there's no sort of overarching system that links them together. So don't start from the bottom, start from the top, and think of, we like to process map it. So you could do this on a whiteboard, but we use a tool called Diagrams. It's free. And basically what we're doing is just, and it seems too simple to be a starting point, but you're basically just documenting what are the core functions of my business. So you've got product research and development for a typical Amazon private label seller, right? You've got product research and development, supply chain, let's call it marketing, which is sort of like product launch and brand management. And then you've got customer support. That's like at the most simple level. A lot of, it's organized differently for each business, but let's just say those are the 4 core functions. The next step you're going to do, and right, that seems a bit too simple as a starting point. Like it's so far, so it's like super easy. The next step that I would do is like go one level deeper. So let's pretend we're zooming into like product research and development. You're really going to think like, what are the different, and we would call these processes, what are the different processes that make up product research and development? So the first step is probably going to be like product research and validation. We want to validate that there is a proper opportunity here. Then the next step is going to be, let's say, product sourcing, because we actually want to source and see if we can find a supplier who could make these. Then we're going to do like samples, so product sampling. Then we're going to do like maybe a second round of product research to actually understand what would the listing look like, who are the competitors, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to have product sign off. So let's say those are the 5 processes of product research and development. And obviously they look different with every business. Then we're going to zoom in a bit more and say, okay, for product sourcing, what's the process for product sourcing? And we're going to zoom in there and say, okay, that's going to be a process map again. Who actually speaks to who? And for a lot of these businesses, they don't have a process. They sort of just do everything ad hoc. So this exercise actually forces people to think, who speaks to who? How do we actually do this? And so you could process map that again, and you can draw it in a notebook. And you can say, okay, well, the product researcher, they create 10 different opportunities, and then the CEO comes in and vets and chooses 2 of the opportunities and passes that on to the sourcing manager in China. The sourcing manager in China speaks to different agencies, sends back 5 different options for each of the 2 products. We then have 10 different things that we need to assess. The CEO goes through the ones that we want to order samples for, and the next step is ordering samples. And it's like, wow, that was actually pretty simple. Now the next step down from that, and this is what I mean by a system tying it all together. It's a hierarchy. You're sort of zooming in and understanding like what's the next level. Mm-hmm. So then the next level is, well, how do we actually go and find those suppliers? Like there's a whole process behind that. So that's a level where I would stop process mapping and start actually creating SOPs. And again, that's not going to be too complicated. It's like we're just documenting the key steps of like, what are we doing for when we're looking for suppliers? There are different certifications that we want to vet for. We want to make sure that they're, eco-friendly and that they've got this specific certificate and things like that. So the main thing that I would say is like, if you're going to start creating SOPs and you've never created SOPs before, start from the top. And the most valuable exercise for you is going to be creating those high level charts. You're not diving into like, where do I click inside of Helium 10 to understand like conversion rate average? You're starting at a high level and just thinking, how does my business flow? Who speaks to who? And we've sort of released quite a lot of documentation about how you can do that by yourself. We've presented with all the different communities and whatever. And does it take some time? Yes, it does. But it's a really valuable exercise where you're actually going to speak to your team members and say, when it comes time to, when someone gives us negative seller feedback, what do we actually do? And I bet you're going to find that there's a lot of things that you've lost touch with in your business, and a lot of things that straight away you're going to be able to improve. But you wouldn't get those opportunities if you started focusing on the most complicated processes and documenting them really granularly. So my number one piece of advice, and I feel like that's enough because it's a really significant starting point, is like start from the top, document the high level flow, and then slowly start to zoom in. And it can take a lot of time, and that's why we exist, to sort of help you do that. But you can do it yourself, and I don't think it makes sense for everyone to work with Escala depending on the size. So you can definitely do that yourself.
Is that something that you would add estimated timeframes for too?
It sort of depends on your availability. If you can dedicate a day a week to this, which is a lot, then it's going to take maybe a couple of months, maybe a month. But if you can dedicate like a full week to it, where you're just doing like a focus group, basically, if you've got everyone in a single room, you could probably smash out. That's so Australian. You could probably execute on that first step of like just documenting the process maps of your entire business if you get everyone in a room. But obviously not everyone has the luxury of doing like a 1 week offsite or whatever.
Oh, I meant more so like within the hierarchy. Should you say like within product development, this should take about a month, and within that you say like, oh, it takes about a week to find suppliers, takes about a week to get samples.
I misunderstood the question.
Charts.
Yeah.
Charts, yeah.
Yeah. So absolutely. I think the template should have like the SLAs of how long, how frequently do you expect these 10 opportunities to show up, and how long should it take the CEO to then go and approve those, and then how long should we give the sourcing? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the business, that's the army coming out in me, where I'm like, things need to have a schedule, and we can't just, yeah.
Are you also a type A person, Lippy?
I'm type A. I'm an ISTJ. I don't know.
I've got to do. I need to figure out what mine is. I need my Enneagram too. We have so many personality tests to take for it, so it's not even funny.
We do.
If we weren't live, I would guess, because that's like a little party trick that I like doing. But we're live, and I don't want to make that mistake.
I don't think you could offend us. Let's do it.
Yeah, do it.
Let's go.
No. There's no way I'm doing it. But there's only 16 personalities. So if you learn about them, you can pretty much be like, okay, introvert, extrovert. I think you're both extroverts. Observant versus, and this is why observant versus intuitive. I'd say Francois, you're probably intuitive. I'm not sure about you.
You are correct.
But you guys should go and do the test, and then I'll make my predictions offline, and I can email them to you.
We'll do that. We'll do that. 100%.
Sure. But as we come up on the end of the episode, you had mentioned something before about how and forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but that maybe not every business is correct for Escala. What is like the right size business to work with you guys? Like who's your ideal? Who's the best fit?
Sure. So we, I would say if you're too small, like if you're less than 7 figures, then probably not ready just yet. Like 7 figures is probably the threshold, but we work with all the way from 7 figures all the way up to like 9. And then we're working with a lot of aggregators actually on some really interesting work there as well. What is exciting, and I'm not sure if this is the part where I'm allowed to plug myself yet, but
of course,
what is exciting is that we're releasing a course of how you can actually do this by yourself. It's not released yet. I wish it was, so that I could like provide a link, but it's going to be released early 2022. Okay. And that's going to be called the Escala Academy, and I'm sure we'll be, I'm sure people will see it on their LinkedIn and Facebook when it finally gets released.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, whenever it does get released, be sure to send me the link, because I can go on ahead and update the if it's early 2022, then it'll already be in the description of the audio, but I can always go back and change the video. So just send it to me whenever it's ready.
Awesome. So people listening to this in the future, just click on the link. And
yeah, we'll have to have you back on to talk about, the Academy and how businesses could effectively use it. And I mean, I think we touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to organization. There's so much that goes into SOPs and building out a business, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that it is a business. It's not, you're not an Amazon seller. That's just a label. You're building out an entire business. It has marketing, it has sales, it has finance, it has operations, all these different pillars to your business. That's why I was excited to talk to you today. Yanni got me excited a few months back, but now having you on, I feel like we have to have you on again to actually dive deeper into these org structures too.
I would love to. I mean, I'm a total nerd when it comes to these things, and I can just talk about them for days. Most people don't want to listen to me, so if you want to listen, then I'd be more than happy to come back.
100%.
Absolutely. And we'll get you in when Yanni is out in February, right? So then you don't have to kick him out of his own office. He can just already be gone. Perfect. Well, where can folks go to find more information about Escala and maybe even contact you to ask any questions that they may have?
Yeah, so the best way I think is to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can see that the website is there. If you're audio, it's We Are Escala. I got to say that in an American accent. We are Escala. People don't really understand it with my Australian accent, but yeah, the best way is to just reach out to me on LinkedIn and just shoot me a message, and we can jump on a call and sort of talk about how we might help.
Perfect. Awesome. And again, anybody listening, as We Are Escala, ESCALA. It's like trying to give somebody your phone number. So many letters and like so many numbers sound the same over the phone. It's a lot. Just look in the description, folks. I've got it for you. Or come to YouTube. It's on the screen. Well, Lipi, thank you so much for taking the time this evening to talk to us.
Thank you, guys.
Really
this has been awesome.
We see you at? Well, I don't even know if we're going, but do you plan on going to Prosper?
Yeah, we'll be exhibiting at Prosper and hopefully bringing out some of the teams so that we can meet them. I mean, if they won't let us into the Philippines, we'll bring the Philippines to Vegas.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, everybody can catch you guys there. And like we said, go ahead and reach out to Lipi via LinkedIn or visit them at weareescala.com. Again, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody who
Thanks
has
so much.
tuned in. If you guys liked what you heard today, be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, share this episode with your friends, subscribe to the show, and be sure to turn on those notifications so that you never miss a discussion with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Lipi with Escala. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.
Bye, guys.